I think that's working. If not, I'll reset it back up. So now I am doing a little bit of ZBrush recording that required some vanilla ZBrush, so I figured we could walk through this a little bit. So essentially, what I have here is, if I go to my ZBrush data folder, so C, users, public documents, ZBrush data. Go ahead and close it down here. This is where everything is for when you have like quick save files and also your Z startup hotkeys and your Z startup config files. Here's your custom user interface, startup documents, startup material, all that good stuff. So if you're migrating any data between like one version of ZBrush 2021 to another version of ZBrush 21 somewhere else, this is what you'd want to take with you, is basically your config, custom user interface config, and then your hotkeys folder, and all these config files, and basically your Z startup, this stuff right here. So now if I wanted to go like, I have all of my ZBrush 2021 set up, but I also want to start out with vanilla ZBrush 2021 because I need to walk through some basic functionality, make sure my interface is, vanilla, basically. What I need to do is I just went through here and I just copied this off. So I had my good one here, I just Control-C, Control-V, and I left that copy in there. This one here, I'm going to name recording. So this is going to be like what I'm using for vanilla while I'm recording. And then this copy right here, this is my good one. This is what I'm going to use for streaming today because it's all set up with all my custom interface and my hotkeys and good stuff like that. So I'm just going to delete all that. So now when I start up ZBrush, it's going to look for this folder first. If it doesn't see any of these, if I left it like this, it wouldn't recognize either of these as usable. It would just make me a new ZBrush Data 2021. It would be completely vanilla install of ZBrush. I mean, not the install itself, just your config. The install files are all here. So ZBrush 2021, this is where you're going to put where things end up in the lightbox. Like here's your Z alphas, here's your Z brushes, here's your Z startup brush presets. If you have any brushes you want to bring in that you want to use and assign hotkeys to. Hey, everybody. Just going over some really boring stuff right now. So we have, and I wouldn't worry about these hotkeys right here. I think that these are all just like, here's your Z startup, and then you're basically like what's going to come into ZBrush. Now there is another folder in here called Z data. So Pixelogic ZBrush 2021, Z data brush presets. These are the brushes that come in with ZBrush. So this is where I have, you see a brush presets copy. I just Control-C, Control-V, so I always have a backup to go to, because if I make any changes to these are the core ZBrush brush files. So probably just be careful when you're messing with these. And then when you start up ZBrush, of course, now I think, oops, let me make sure I did that right. ZBrush 2021. So we called this is recording. This is the one I want to look at now. And even this one here, it's like, okay, I don't need the recording one here. So I'm going to say unpin from quick access. And we'll just drag 2021 over here. And we're good to go. So now when I start up ZBrush, it should be back to our usual user config, my usual settings. And it should pop up right in the middle of the screen here. Fingers crossed. There we go. So we're ready to record. I've got my PAV custom up here. I've got all my little files in here, and we're good to go. But like I said before, the C, this folder here, I like having quick access to these. So basically my Z brushes in here, you see I have a bunch of underscore brushes in here. These are all sitting, oops, go to ZBrush tab. They'll all sit right at the end here, underscore. So there's that. Now, I was going over some stuff. I was going to hit on some things. Here, so let me pull open. See if I have any resources for this. I'm not sure if I do. I don't really have an agenda today, so if you guys have a question or something you want to go over, we can certainly do that. Let me see if I have anything under creature. Not really. Yeah, okay. Well, so way back in the day, I thought I had something on feathers, but I don't. we did, if you go to my YouTube channel and you go to my playlists here, incidentally, this is, so I have two playlists where this video will end up. It's going to be, I'll throw them on my ZBrush Livestream full episodes here, and it's not ZBrush, it's just Livestream full episodes here, and then also when I stream on Pixelogic's channel, it goes here, so the Pixelogic Workshop. Here's the last couple I've done, and then if you go to my channel, so it doesn't hop back and forth, I've got the stylized owl thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up bird feet, and I'm just going to see what's going on with bird feet. Maybe I should look up chicken feet in particular. Yeah, I guess that's a pretty good one. So bumpy all around except for down the middle here. I think we can accomplish that. So let's go in here and let's make some bird feet real quick. Question, hey Michael, can I ask how you approach for mobile game assets and PC game assets? Do you create supporting edges for mobile game for high-res model to bake out normal map? Sure. Yeah, if your game supports normal maps. I mean, I'll usually use supporting edge loops as a last resort, or as the last thing I do. If I need to hold an edge, I'll use creasing first, and then if I have to use edge loops, supporting edge loops, then I'll do that. But it's not the first thing I do. Build out, hey pre-drag, build out my volume first, like what I'm trying to create. So if we have sphere here, plane mesh 3D, Control Shift, let's grab slice curve. I'm also using I'm standing up again, so take this here. So we have this shape over here. Say delete hidden. So this is the shape I want to make. We'll see your mesh half, depth size down to 0, and then keep going half here. So this is the shape I kind of want to start with, and Q mesh polygroup all. We'll pull this out, and instead of going through here and immediately being like, okay, let's go into dynamic mode here, and I'm going to say insert single edge loop and go through here. If I want to do both sides, I'll do an inset polygroup all region, and you know what, I'm just going to go to legacy, insert region, and just pull this in. Okay, I can tighten these up, I can tighten these up, and now I have a nice tight crease along here. Instead of doing that, because that's, especially if I'm going to end up like modeling over this and be like, oh, you know what, let's go through here and let's say I want to polygroup this poly loop here, and then inset polygroup all on this side, and maybe Q mesh polygroup all and hold, you know, pull this out or pull this in or something. These control loops and ways to kind of control the fall off on your shapes there are a nightmare to use, generally speaking. I don't like using them. So I'll go through here and instead I'll do a crease PG, crease level of maybe 3, smooth subdiv of 4, and I'll just use that to hold my edge. And then if I need to, I can just bake this geometry off, so I can go through here and hit apply, and then that's real geometry. I can just send that out to get baked to. As opposed to, or if I do need to hold that edge for some reason, or I want to have like, I want it to be tight over here and have a bigger fall off on the other side or something like that, you know, I'll bevel that edge and make sure that that happens, but that'll be a last resort. So creasing, volume, creasing, and then as a last resort, edge loops. And this is also less destructive too, so I can just leave, before I go to bake, I can just be like, okay, I can just leave this here, crease level 3, smooth subdiv 4. I can just have this, and if I ever want to make changes, just Shift D, and then I can go through here and make changes, and then hit D again, and I'm good to go. So if I did want to go through here and say, okay, yeah, polygroup here, and then inset here, and then Q mesh here, and then do another like crease PG, hit D for dynamic, and then we go through here. Let's do a crease polygroup all, or edge loop balloon plate here and here. So now I can make changes. I still have all my borders here, everything's fine, and I can just turn it on and off as needed. So I'm not stuck with. When I do my supporting edges, my normal map and some spanner do not bake out correctly, I subdivide the high-res model without using SMT. Oh, you're talking about if you do, well, then using subdivision, dynamic is actually more important in that case. So see how, here's my original, if you're going to use this as your original low res, and then you're going to use this as your high res to bake to, then I would say dynamic is even more important. because what's going to happen is if you don't use dynamic and you just hit Control D, you're holding your creases good, so it shouldn't melt too much. But what can happen is if you just go through and you subdivide, it's going to average your vertices down, so it could pull it away, far away from your original low res, which can be problematic. I mean, this one, in this instance, it shouldn't. This should be fine, since I'm, maintaining those edges of the creasing up until subdivision level 5. So I think this should be okay. But yeah, use dynamic smooth, and then you can export this low res, or you can even clean this one up. It's like, you know what, I'm going to bake this in the normal map. So of course, it can be arbitrary, so I can just duplicate this off and say collapse poly loop down and down. So now here's my low res here, and then my high res can be this one. I can hit D for dynamic. There's my dynamic. I can hit apply, so it's real geometry. Export this as my high, export this as my low, and it should bake okay. If it doesn't bake okay, subdivide the high res model without using SMT. Well, I mean, that might be problematic as well. Like if I subdivide this model, so I've got dynamic turned off, and it's like, okay, I want to bake this out, and I turn SMT off, and I go through here and I divide. It's just going to do that. So like, it's not going to be smooth. It's dividing, but so you definitely want SMT on without using SMT. Yeah, I'm not sure why you would turn SMT off. So SMT on, divide it up, and now it's nice and smooth, and you can bake to that. So best size to make my full character. My unified character is too small for noisemaker pores, and I have to decrease my brush scale to make fine details. If you go in here to Z plugin, and you go to Scale Master, you click on this, and you click on this video here.
So here's a quick video showing the...
That'll show you a video for Joseph Drust's Scale Master. This is a good way to set your scene scale. One thing I would say, if you're bringing in anything externally, so if you want to go through here and say, let's do this. I'm trying to think of something I could bring in that would be bizarre. I guess it could be anything. So I'm going to go here to import. I'm just going to grab something real quick. That'll work. So let's say like you go into Unreal and you export out the mannequin guy, and then you bring it into ZBrush. That's how I would suggest working. Is oops, sorry, don't import cameras. Okay, that's how I would suggest working. Is essentially go to our Marvel's Designer avatar or something like that, bring it into ZBrush as an import, and just start working natively. So we can always switch here, Control N. So essentially I've got this weirdo file here, and it's like, okay, I go down here because I've imported it. I'm going to go in here to size, and in this case, let me see. Yeah, this one came in a little bit small. Let's try this. Let's do something I know that's going to be bizarre. You know what? I wonder if I have something here. I don't. So here, File, Export OBJ, Desktop, Single Object, Weld, blah blah blah. Millimeters is fine. Okay. So if I go in here, wait for it. So I've got a window open or something. Oh, I do. Close that. So essentially, let's go ahead and delete all these. So I've got a weirdo file sitting somewhere, and I need to bring it into ZBrush. I'm going to go in here to import, and I'm just going to go to my desktop here, and we're just going to grab that OBJ. And I drag this out, and it's like, oh, good. This works fine. I can go through here and you're going to see I can make my draw size really big. Everything seems to be scaled appropriately, right? However, when I go down here to my size, it's set to 2 because ZBrush natively wants to bring things in and set it to a ZBrush unit scale. If I append a cube, it fits perfectly right within that cube, that unify bounding box area basically. So this is where ZBrush prefers to work. This is going to make sure your brushes are all compatible and your not your symmetry, but like just basically all your tools that you're going to use within ZBrush like to work around this kind of bounding box. The farther off this XYZ size gets, the more unpredictable ZBrush is going to behave, which is fine. When you bring something into ZBrush, it sets it to that size, and then when you export it from ZBrush, it's going to multiply it by this scale number. So it's going to multiply by 966, 4972. So this is important. So basically you want to make sure that while you're in ZBrush, this stays at about 2. The more it deviates from that, the crazier it's going to get. So if I go in here to load a tool, and let's go in here to base bodies, male, I'm going to bring this guy in. Same thing, I worked at a completely different unit scale for him. It's pretty close to 1.8, and then when I go to export this, it's going to scale by 51. So these are completely incompatible. If I take this avatar here, or take this base body male, or to this avatar and say append my base body male, you're going to see he's way down here, he's tiny, and this guy's gigantic. If I go back to the body male, it's not the case. My draw size works fine, everything's great. If I go to this avatar here and I'm like, oh, you know what? I don't need to work on this avatar. I really want to work on this base body male. So I'm going to hit F to frame. I'm going to go in here and sculpt on him. All of a sudden, my scale is way off. So I go through here and I'm like, okay, I want to, like you were saying, I want to sculpt some pore detail. Well, it's kind of capped out here. You can cheat it, not cheat it, but you can fix that. You can go in here to Preferences, Draw, and there's a max brush size, so you can go down here to Dynamic Brush Scale. If your model's too big and your brush caps out like here for at 1,000, you can go in here and say, you know, crank up your max brush size or increase your dynamic brush scale. We want to do the opposite in this case. I'm going to set this like 0.1. So now my brush size can get down to this small, and then I can go up from there. So now I can kind of get pore detail going. However, if I go down here to my size, I'm working at a 0.1 size. So now that's nowhere near 2. So now ZBrush is going to act and one of the things it's going to act unpredictable with is its brush size. So now your brush size is way too big or way too small. You want this XYZ size to be around 2. Now if it's just one object, it's easy enough. You can just go down here to Deformation Unify, and now it's set to 2, and now your brush will work as intended. However, now you're going to see, oh, my brush gets capped out at this big. What if I want to move, you know, a larger part of his head here? That's where that Preferences Draw size comes in the Dynamic Brush Scale. We set this back to 1, and because we're at XYZ size of 2, just setting at the 1 should be fine. Again, if he gets too big, let's go ahead and scale him up. You can scale him up, or you can also hit, you can actually use this XYZ sizing, type in like 200. So now it's like, okay, well, I guess it caps out at 100. So you can go down here to Size and say F. Okay, so now we're working at this brush scale, and my XYZ size is 1600. And now I go in here and I want to start sculpting, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put my draw size up to 1000, and it's a pinpoint. It's like, oh, well, I can fix that. I go in here to Preferences, Draw, and I can say, crank my max brush size up to 5000. Now I can go all the way up to 5000, and it's still this big as I can make my brush scale. Okay, well, let's go in here to Dynamic Brush Scale and hit 10. So I'm going to put a multiplier on that. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So I can just keep cranking up that Dynamic Brush Scale. That's a fix for your brush size. It's not really a fix for your working scene. So Unify, XYZ, size to 2, everything back to normal. Dynamic Brush Scale of 1, max brush size of 1000, and everything should be working fine. So the best size to make your full character, I think, is 2 to make it the most predictable. Noisemaker pores, and I have to decrease my brush scale to make fine details. then I guess you can undercrank it a bit. You can go to dynamic brush scale, set it to like 0.25 or 0.5. But and I mean, if that is somehow like if this XYZ size, I haven't really run into that where XYZ size of 2 or a unified scale doesn't allow me to do everything I need in ZBrush. Then you can kind of play around with that maybe. Change a pivot point for a certain mesh while using the insert mesh. For example, I'm making myself custom. Yeah. So if you go to my YouTube channel and we go to, I think it was ZBrush 2020. No, what would I put that under? Well, it would be 2021, 2019. It would be a ZBrush IMM Access Orientation Snapping. Check this out. So this video here goes through like how to set your Gizmo IMM stuff, if that's what you're talking about. Custom Boolean insert meshes, like to insert a half circle at the center of the point where it'd be if it's on the on an IMM brush. Oh yeah, this wouldn't help you there, but for anybody it would help. I'll just copy this in here. This is a way where you can drag out IMM and it kind of gets skewed a little bit, and you're like, well, why isn't it following the surface of the object? That'll set that up. There is a way you can. It's gross, but there is a way. I think I might even have a brush in here. Let's check it out. It's an old one. Do I have it? I don't. So I was doing brushes where it was basically taking an object and animating it out. However, you had to set the pivot to be the center, and basically what I had to do is put a bounding box around every single brush to determine where that pivot would end up. And then I would just get rid of the bounding box. It's kind of, I'm trying to see if I can probably walk through that. It's boring, but we can do that. So way to snap move rotation. So way to snap move rotation to the center of another object. Probably. There's a lot of questions about that too, where it's like, I need to snap this face to this point, or I need to snap this point to this face, or this face to this face. And I know, like in any other 3D program, like MyMax Moto, you can just say this face on this face, and it goes bloop, and the rotation might be off, but then you can align, blah blah blah. Generally, for that kind of stuff, I just use IMM brushes, and it's a lot less clunky for me than kind of going in here and selecting a face. I know there's going to be some, like, especially if you're doing like, well, I like to do modular sets, and I want to do it in ZBrush, but I need all these weird ass snapping tools. Maybe do your modular sets not in ZBrush. Do all your snapping that you need, and then come into ZBrush. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there are some plugins you can get that will do like snapping, but I can't really think of anything off the top of my head that would be a real elegant solution for, like, you know, taking a pivot point. You can manually move it over, but you wouldn't be able to find the center of a pivot. So you have a subtool here and you have a pivot point, and it's like, okay, I want this to inherit this pivot so I can rotate, you know, like do a rotation of planets or something like that. So you have a sphere, make Polymesh 3D. Let's go ahead and scale this down and control drag this out. And I'm like, okay, let's say split mass points. And I'm like, okay, I want this to be at the center of the world. If I hold down Alt, I mean, if the pivot is the center of the world, it's easy. It's just hold down Alt and hit that house button, and then now this one here. Oh, center of world. There we go. So this one's at the, they're both at the center now, but now I can just rotate this around that pivot center. You know what? I think there is. I think under transform, there's some S pivot, set pivot point. To find the center points, rotating, deforming, symmetrical editing, and other actions when pressed. Mesh is partially visible, but determines the geographic center of the visible portion, sets the center of the object in the location. Doing this on another object, that I'm not sure. S pivot functionality. We can all learn along with Joseph Droz. Oh, So this is where I go, okay, yeah, playback speed 2x.
This is Joseph Drust, and welcome back to another episode of Ask ZBrush. So we had a question sent in asking, when I use S-Pivot, objects sometimes are not centered to the world. So to start off, I just have ZBrush loaded up, and the question is asking about the S-Pivot function. Put that to the side. I have a sphere like this, and I come across and say turn the floor grid on, and then switch to the Move Transpose tool, drag this out, and then just reposition the sphere off in space like that. And now if I come over here to that transform palette and I click this S-Pivot button, what this will do is it's going to take this mesh and then center it to the middle of the world. So it's going to look at the bounding box and center it. So if I come over here and click this, you're going to see that the sphere now has jumped right to the center of the world. Now, most of the time, this is the functionality you're going to find when you use this S-Pivot button. So you click S-Pivot, it's going to pop the mesh to the middle of the world, and then when you click C-Pivot, the clear pivot option here, it's going to return the model back to where it was.
Oh.
Now, there is an alternate functionality with the S-Pivot button that you can run into. So as an example of this, let's come across our model here, and I'm just going to have the standard brush selected, and I'm just going to draw mode here, and I'm just going to make a little dimple. So I'm just going to sculpt this area right here. Now, if you have sculpted on your model, and now you come over here and use this S-Pivot, instead of taking the model and using its bounding box and centering it to the world, it's going to now look at that last stroke you made. So it's going to look at the dimple that I just created on the model. And now if I click S-Pivot, it's now going to center the mesh based on that stroke. So as you can see, it has centered that sphere directly where I painted that stroke on the mesh. So that process again, let me just undo this here. So I'm doing back to my sphere here. Now most of the time you will not run into this, because usually when you're using set pivot, you're just selecting a model, you're going to look at that last area sculpted on and then centering to that area. First S-Pivot, so it's centered that area.
And you can probably tell by the fact that I have no clue how to do it, how many times I've actually had to do that in ZBrush. So it hasn't come up in 15 years for me, so I don't have a real good answer for that. So is trying to use crease edges. Oh, I was trying to use crease edges when I export the mesh. The creases are gone. Like pre-drag says, yeah, you have to hit, like what I kept doing here is, so Control Z. Sorry, for some reason it pops up a dialog box. It seems to take a bit. So we don't have dynamic just yet. So these are real subdivisions. So you have dynamic turned on, and if you export this right now, it's not going to behave correctly because it's just a dynamic preview. It's not real geometry. So in fact, if I was to go in here and be like, oh, let's go ahead and turn on Dynamesh, it's going to give you that result because it's not real geometry. So if you want to export this actual geometry, hit apply. Now you have real subdivisions. Now you can export this as real geometry to bake. And then now if I go through here and I say Dynamesh no, you'll get the smoother result. Oh, perfect. Awesome. You have any tips on why I would change? Yeah, when it comes to like, and I get it, because I mean, there are some instances where I'm like, and I'll show you guys this too in case I mean, obviously the people asking this question don't really need this, but for anybody else out there, you have a cylinder here, and it's like, okay, I want to snap this cylinder to, what would be, I don't know, a cone. So I have a cone here. Actually, I can just go through here. So we got our Polymesh 3D cylinder. Anything you append to a Polymesh 3D, we'll go ahead and convert it to a Polymesh 3D. So here's a Polymesh 3D cone here. And these are dragged out. And this cone is over here in space. And we have this cylinder. And it's like, okay, I want to snap this face to this face up here. There are plugins that'll do that. There might be some fancy ZBrush stuff that'll do that. But generally speaking, whenever I want to snap something to another surface, it's as an insert mesh. So then now I can just go through here and be like, well, yeah, I can snap to whatever surface I want. But then it becomes a thing where it's like, well, I want it to snap directly to that center point exactly. And I could see how that would be useful for sure. And maybe even like conform to, but I mean, again, how I use ZBrush, I don't really have like those kind of needs where I'm like, okay, this face on this face and this object conform to this. And I know if I'm doing like architectural previs or something, it would be like, oh, that'd be very useful to make, I don't know, something really boring. But I don't really use ZBrush to make boring stuff. So I don't need to snap constantly very particular things to ratios and, angles and stuff like that. I just use IMM Brush and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's on there. Great. Now I'm going to turn this into something neat. Go through here and sculpt out a skull on this thing. So you can go in here and let me see if I don't have any alpha skulls in here, but go grab the Ryan Kingsline skull and just put it on here, and now I've got something cool I want to sculpt, and I'm not worried about like, oh wait, this face right here. I need to do something very particular with this face. Like, nah, not me. Do you have any tips on why it would change by itself at XYZ is 2? It changed after a while as the position, so I have to keep going back and unifying it. I mean, if you scale it, I think. So if I take yeah, so like I'm already off of, you know, my XYZ size is 3, but I think that might be, I'm not really sure. I mean, as long as it's within a threshold, as long as it's not like 300, it should be okay. You know, as I scale this up, this XYZ size gets a little bigger. So yeah, I guess as it breaks that bounding box of 2, but I mean, you can't be expected to just sit within a 2 bounding box for everything. But again, as long as you're not like at 0.001 or 200, that should behave okay. Where I see most of this happening, where I see most of that trouble starting from, is when people grab a ZSphere. This is already at, no, it's XYZ size of 1. But if you go through here and it's like, okay, I'm going to make a human. So I'm going to hit X, go across X axis and pull this out here, and then pull this out here. So I've got middle of the body here, and actually I should orient myself in space here. Z forward here. We're going to go through here and pull out some shoulders and some arms here and some hips. Oops. Some legs, knees, elbows. Beautiful. And put in a little bit of a neck and a head here. This will be our cool dude. So here's our character here. It's like, okay, I'm going to start sculpting on this character, so I'm going to go down here, my adapt to skin, let's turn off density and dynamesh, all that stuff, and just hit make. Now we got our skin here, we're in X symmetry, and you know what, let's just go ahead and dynamesh this, sure. So I'm going to dynamesh this resolution 128 might be a little bit higher than you expect, and that's because probably your XYZ size is already at 6, so if you're making this big character and you like really pulled out and the head's up here and the feet are down here, your XYZ size is going to be pretty monstrous. So just remember when you're using Z-spheres, your scale starts out pretty big already. So at this point, yeah, if I just go through here real quick and just do a unify, now I'm an XYZ size of 2. And now even your dynamesh resolution will be affected by that because your object is smaller. Dynamesh is going to give you less resolution. But at 128, that's about what I expect. And I can just go up from there. So we could say 176. Go through here and start look at that. Nice. How can you soften edges normals like in Maya for game resolution mesh? I have to take my models to Maya for defining which edges are soft or hard before exporting UE4, which is a pain. Yeah, so when you go to export, short answer, you don't in ZBrush. You can go in here to FBX and you can save this. Then your FBX options. There is, you can do smooth normals, all smooth normals. So 100% smooth, or you can turn that off and be 100% hard. Generally speaking, when you're exporting your high reses, you definitely want this on, because when you do a hard edge, it's going to, when you average your normals, it's essentially taking one normal position per vertex. So it's average, so it's just one value, and it's going to be a much smaller size, it's going to be read much faster. It's just all around good. Also, if your high res isn't that high res, it could also bake out faceting if you have this off. When you go to hard edges, what it's going to do is it's going to go, okay, this vert has these. Yeah, it's kind of hard to show in ZBrush. You have, due to the camera, you have this way and this way and this way and this way and one vert, and instead of going, hey, I'm going to take all those directions and just average out one single normal, it's going to go, I need a normal this way and I need a normal this way, and sometimes even more normals to kind of maintain or give the math needed to go, this is the normal direction. So hard normals are going to contain actually more information than soft normals, because soft normals are just an average position, one position, versus multiple, 2, 3. So when you export this with this off on a high-res model, it's going to exponentially increase your file size and all that good stuff. So back to your question, yeah, there's no way in ZBrush that I know of to determine, if I have a cylinder here, edit, make Polymesh 3D, and I'm doing a hard surface model, and I've got my normals over here, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to split along here and have padding in my UVs so we can get a nice bake and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like, okay, I want these to be soft, and you know what? I want to go in here and run a thing that's going to say, uh, harden my edges along my open UV borders. 'Cause I'm already paying the cost of the two positions on my UVs, so it's free, and then I can use my hard surface modeling skills to like make sure my border edges end up where they need to for hard surface modeling. I get it, but in ZBrush, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to go like these soft, these are these all soft, these all hard. I don't think it carries that information out. I can't think of a way that would be like, do this. Unless it's all soft. If you want to export your low-res model and they're all average normals, then sure. Just have that option checked on in FBX. Third-party models in the ZBrush and hitting subdivide, it will tear up the model along sharp edges. Not sure I've run into that. You could do, I mean, as long as those verts are actually supposed to be welded, and they are sitting on top of each other, go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Weld Points, and then I'll weld them back. So if you had like this, so we can have these split off, we can say split hidden, and then I'm going to, and I actually have to be careful with this one too, because when I have merge, you can actually weld as you merge. I'm going to go ahead and merge these back. It's like, okay, great. I've got an awesome model here. I'm going to start subdividing. And it's like, oh, what the hell just happened? As long as those verts are supposed to be there, you can go geometry. I mean, you could merge down with weld option, but also geometry, modify topology, weld points. And then now when I subdivide, it'll be put back together. Cool. Thanks for the kind words, Thinking Boy. Do you have any tips for non-destructive posing in Transpose Master? Yeah, when you do Transpose Master, you can turn on the layer option, and that way you can only, I mean, it'll be for every subtool though. So if you have 100 subtools, you'll have a layer that'll contain the pose data, so you can always go back to a so take your layer slider and just move it back to 0 or turn it off, and it'll get rid of the pose. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of non-destructive, but also kind of pain. And I suppose you could also, actually, I want to say I've done this too. Maybe it was on my ZBrush for concept and ideation. I'm not sure if I have something in particular for that. There is a way you can actually store, if you're talking about like, okay, I have a ZSphere rig and I'm posing it out and I want to snap back. You can actually, when you're posing on your ZSphere rig, you can put your poses in a layer as well. So while you're rotating your ZSphere rig, have layer turned on and you can save different ZSphere rig poses, and then you can have that in Transpose Master and you can bring that rig in. That's kind of non-destructive. It might be better. I was thinking Bounded Box too, a better way. There might be. Again, I'm no ZBrush master. I just use ZBrush on live streams once a month. Is there a way I can mirror and weld a tool and keep non-symmetrical feature I tries using Symmetry Sim? So you want to mirror everything except for one particular piece. Yeah, there's a, well, yeah. So let's try this. Let's go in here and we have Unify. And I'm like, okay, so this guy's not symmetrical. If I do a mirror and weld, number one's going to yell at me because I have subdivision levels. So that might be first one is like, hey, mirror and weld, you can't have subdivision levels. But let's say I wanted to keep my subdivision levels, and I also wanted to keep this big lump on this side of this guy's head. But everything else I want mirrored. So what I probably would do is I would do this. I would say Control Tab this point in history. I'm going to go down to subdivision level 1. And I'm going to say I want this side to be my good side, or you know what, probably even more likely is I want to do a mirror and weld, keep my subdivision history, go down here and like you said, do a deformation, smart resim, and then just step up my subdivision levels here, just so you can see that visually. What I mean by that is just going up in subdivision levels and then doing a smart resim, going up subdivision levels, doing a smart resim. The reason I do that is because it can just tend to be a little more accurate and a little bit faster on high resolution models. But now you can see he's perfectly symmetrical down the middle. His abs aren't off symmetry anymore, but I lost my lump. Well, this is where I can go into like BH brush history recall and just get my lump back on that side. And then I turn on X symmetry, and now it's like everything's perfectly symmetrical. I kept my subdivision history, but I kept that lump. Yeah. Gotcha. Oh yeah, and that's another thing too. When you're talking about this grid down here, you can see the world center. So if I go in here to draw and say elevation at 0, that's the actual world center in here. However, by default, what ZBrush does is set this to -1, and the reason for that is when you go to render, usually the lowest point, lowest subtool in your scene is like the bottom subtool, and that's probably going to be sitting on the ground. So if you wanted a ground plane easily, you know, setting that to -1 is nice and useful. It can kind of throw people off though, when they're like, I modeled this and it's, you know, not sitting at 0, 0, 0, but now it looks like he's on a ground plane on my grid. Speaking of grids, if you go in here, you can change the grid size and your tiles and stuff in here under the draw menu. So if that's throwing you off, that might be something to look into. Is there a way to make your working selected subtool transparent and sculptable? So while you're working, there is preferences, draw, transparent. I mean, this transparency in ZBrush kind of requires stuff around it in order to know that it's transparent. Like if I had a subtool in here, say append cylinder, and I drag this back behind, and then I turn on transparency, ghost or not, and then preferences, draw. It's like I can switch opacity. I guess front opacity is the one we want here, and transparency depth a little bit to kind of get the result I want. But I have this one selected. If I want to sculpt on this one and have it be transparent, preferences. I mean, if you guys know this on render, you go into BPR settings, turn on transparent, and then now when you render, it'll be transparent. But sculpting transparent, not that I know of. So for Kirkland, the non-symmetrical thing, and you want to use mirror and weld as opposed to using smart resim, it's the exact same process. Control click in your history, so we can do that too. So let's say I'm going to do a quick mirror. Delete lower. Mirror and weld. And now it's like, okay, I've used mirror and weld, or I have a non-symmetrical thing over here, but I want to use mirror and weld now. That would be the exact same thing. Control tap this point in history, do your mirror and weld, and then use your brush history recall and just grab that back. I think that's probably the most elegant solution for that. Is there a way to make a surface noise more crisp when applying to a mesh? Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, let's do that. So there's actually kind of a new feature in ZBrush. I'm going to take this piece here, and we're going to say split hidden, and we'll just run a DynaMesh on this. And you know what, let's turn on Sculptors Pro, and we'll just kill some of these jagged edges there and redrag. Okay, so let's turn off our floor, and we have this, and we want to do some surface noise, or even if we're like sculpting, I'm trying to think of a good brush, or really any brush. We'll just take our standard brush and clone it off. Maybe there is a noise in here, so underneath stroke, there's a new brush imperfection. So as I go through here, it'll start adding noise. There's also, underneath your brush, there's surface noise, and in surface noise, you can add noise to your brush here. So if you want to add very specific types of noise in your brush, you can do that. So now you can say brush imperfection down to 0, and you'll still have surface noise, that very specific surface noise. And then you can go in here to brush imperfection and add even more noise on top of that, I suppose. But if you want to do sharpen up these details, or if we go in here like Damien Standard, these are global, by the way, so turn that off. The other thing in here too is jitter, so you can turn that up, and it will kind of just start bouncing your stroke around. I'm going to turn that down. So we have this, and we have, oh boy, let's go reset brush. I'll reset all brushes. So now through here, we have our Damien Standard brush, and we're going to carve in some detail. Or another one that's good is, this is on a ZBrush Masters video, and I guess it would be under Creature. Here it is. Damn Standard 02. You can Google this one, and now we can go through here, and this will give you, it'll kind of inflate as it goes. So this will kind of give you, I wish I remember what video it was on. I want to say Rodriguez. So you can get some nice creaturey stuff going like this. Now, if you wanted to sharpen these details, there is a macro in here. So there's a macro, and you can do a enhance details, and that'll run a bunch of stuff to go through here, and it actually puts it on a layer. So if you want to dial this up, or if you want to over crank those details, or do the opposite and soften them up, you can. There's also, if we go through here and just say delete all and undo that, there's also a way you can go to here to deformation, and if you do a, make a new layer. This is also on another video. I wish I remembered what it was. I think it was something like enhanced bake all. Sorry, don't delete bake. It was also something like make a new layer, and then if you go through here and you do a smooth on this layer, that'll go ahead and soften it out. However, on your layer, you can turn this off, and just like we were doing before, it's like, okay, this is a smooth amount. If you go negative, it'll actually run a little sharpen. So instead of smoothing, it'll sharpen if you go negative, and in fact, you can overcrank this sharpen as well. So that'll give you a little more contrast between your strokes there. I don't remember what, but you'd have to look up the ZBrush Masters video and kind of dig through those. Yeah, oh, and as far as like applying to your mesh, so the whole question was surface noise, sorry about that. Let's go back here. And let's do this. Let's do Control W, Control Shift, do a slice. Delete hidden. So we have an object here, and we want the surface noise on there. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to do surface noise, and well, the crispness of the surface noise is also going to be dictated by your resolution. If you don't have enough resolution to support your detail, it's going to come out aliased and kind of soft. So the post-process sharpen is where that would come in. So again, if we want to go through here and like crank that strength a bit, maybe, but even that can be controlled. So hit OK. If you want even more control, so there's two ways to get control here. You can go in here to layers, add a layer, go down here to morph target, store morph target, and then we have surface noise. You can go down here, instead of applying surface noise, you can do mask by noise, and now you can go through here. I'm going to go to my masking options, say turn off view mask. So now I can literally kind of inflate through like so, and you're going to see I don't have a whole lot of resolution on here, so it's not really picking up enough of that surface imperfection, but I can go through here and I can say inflate of 1 and get my surface noise, and then past this point you can go through here and you can say, okay, let's turn this off. You can say, okay, we'll dial this down so it's no noise, and we can also go and invert this noise, or I can overcrank this noise. And if that's not really what you're looking for, if you're like, you know, let's bake all that, and I say, I really want to sharpen this up, this is where you can go in here and you can do your macro, and you can try enhancing your details, and then that'll give you all those. Or like we did before, shoot. Oh, I guess, yeah, we're back to where we started here. And like we did before, if we go over here to, what did we do before? Oh yeah, we made a new layer and we're like, okay, let's deformation, and we'll smooth this down, and then we'll come over here, turn this off, and we'll do a negative smooth, and then I'll go ahead and start increasing that contrast. Like so. So it's not, but again, you have to have enough geometry to really capture all that detail. If you don't have enough geometry, then it's going to look pixelated or soft. And if I miss anything, I'm sorry, I'm probably way behind now. Can you export Polypaint to KeyShot? It should just do it automatically. I do that all the time. In fact, if you're new to ZBrush, well, if you're new to ZBrush, you can go down here to, which one is it? ZBrush for Ideation. New intro to ZBrush. There's like 60 videos to get you caught up. If you're new to ZBrush 2021, you can, here's the 2021 whole full playlist. So you can go through here and it's just like 8 hours worth of new features for 2021. But you're going to see, trying to get back to what I was answering, you can, so for every single one of these, I have a bunch of like little demo videos where, I'm trying to think of it, yeah, a good example is this one here. So here's a demo time-lapse video of going through here, and then, so yeah, I've got a polypaint here, so I polypainted this guy's face and I want to send it to KeyShot. It should just do it automatically. For instance, go ahead here. Now there is some caveats to that, so you know what, let's load that guy up. Let's take a look at him. Oh, in fact, if you want, so here's that full playlist, by the way. Get caught up on ZBrush 2021, entire playlist. It's on YouTube, and it's 63 videos, so you can check that out. Beyond that, so you have these demo videos up here. It's like, hey, how did you make that car wreck? Or how did you do this basketball rim scene and make all this? I also have, not on QBrush anymore, but on Gumroad and ArtStation here. My products? I don't know. Look on here somewhere. I have, on the marketplace, I have demo videos, and then obviously on Gumroad, I have for download. Why is this all busted up? You know what? Let's do this. There it is. Oh, I guess because it's small. There we go. So this one right here, ZBrush 2021 was new, plus bonus video files. There's 5 extra hours, and I went ahead and threw on the resources here, so you'll actually have the basketball and the shark files and the truck scene and this little lumpy head guy, so you actually can download those Z-tools and check those out. But what we can also do is we can go down here, recording. Let me bring these in real quick. 2021. Oh, you know, it's not even in there. Forgot that was a different test. Truck busted 03. So if I load this up, go out of edit mode here, and let's do this. Let's take, let's hit W, transpose, move multiple selected, and I'm just going to grab, hold down Control Shift. I'm going to take, oh boy. I'm going to take all of this here and unhatch him, and I'm going to hit Control F, and yes, I'm going to say person. So now I go in here to Subtool, and now we have person folder. So I know that everything not in that folder should be deletable, so I'm going to take this truck and say, I guess I can leave all this stuff in there, it's not that big a deal. So we can go through here, and you're going to see this guy has a polypaint on him. So when I go through here and I say render, external renderer KeyShot, and throw that over, I'll show you some ways to deal. And it's also in the bonus videos too, but we'll touch on this a little bit. So I'm using the ZBrush Bridge. So ZBrush Bridge, you can buy, it's a one-time purchase, it's useful, it's just a license that'll carry through all of the versions of ZBrush, and then of course if you want to upgrade KeyShot, that's going to be slightly extra cost here, but we'll go through here. Oh boy, let me see if we're, can y'all see that? Okay, here's one thing I can do. Let's go Camtasia Recorder. There we go. So now I have guides. You also might have noticed when we did, oh, also if you're new to ZBrush 2021, I should bring this up. Let's see. Let's go ahead and pause that. Pixelogic's YouTube channel. Here's the Livestream event. So there's Joseph Drust, there's me, and we're talking all about ZBrush 2021. So if you want to check that out, you can see our live stream, and Joseph Drust goes, there's some really cool functionality too. So look at that. But in here, essentially, if we take this in here and we say edit preferences, okay, so now I can navigate. Oh, the reason I brought that up is while I was recording, I had my Camtasia lined up so I could know where on the screen I was, and I totally forgot it was there, so that's why there was a green border around my screen when I was demoing. So we'll go ahead and kill that. So now we have our object here, and you're going to see we have our Polypaint. So if I double click this in our scene here, let's go ahead and shrink these down a little bit. We have our guy here, and if I double click him, go to my material graph, you're going to see there's a texture map legacy. This is what's holding our Polypaint information. So I'm going to upgrade this node, just double click it, upgrade to new node. Don't need this one anymore, delete it. And in here you're going to see apply matte cap is also on. If you don't want that, just turn that off. You're going to see the mode is set to vertex color. So if I change this to matte cap only, it gets rid of it, but the vertex color is held in KeyShot. Now, if you're not using the bridge, maybe FBX export should hold your Polypaint. I don't know. This is what I use. Another thing I did was go in here I downloaded this, I want to say, translucent human skin from the cloud library. So you can go through here, load up your cloud library, download this, and if I'm like, well, I want to keep my matte cap, but I also want to use this translucent skin, I'm just going to drag this right in here. So now I have all the skin stuff that comes in with this material, and then I'm going to take this and plug it into my surface. So now it's like, oh no, I've lost my Polypaint. And it also looks horrifying. In here, what we can do is we can go through here. We're going to change this translucency down a little bit. 50 might be a little bit much for that scale. And then also underneath textures, these are a little large. So we'll say like 0.1. Oops. 0.1 for the texture and specular, and then also the bump map. We'll tame that down. So now we've got some translucent skin, and again, you can mess with the translucency. But again, we've lost our Polypaint. So this is where that skin color comes into play. If I take my matte cap here and plug that into the texture, now we'll get my Polypaint back. Now if you wanted to, like, let's see, if you wanted to merge this matte cap color, advanced we don't need anymore, by the way. If you wanted to kind of merge this with your, it's like, oh, I wanted to keep some of that skin material here. There's utilities in here, so you can say color adjust, composite, that kind of key method to do. I want to say maybe color composite, so we can go in here and make make this a background, make this color your source, and then you could use this to plug in, so you can kind of mix your Polypaint and the original, or the skin texture that came in with the this here. Maybe play around with that. But again, long story short, your matte cap and your apply matte cap here is still there, and your vertex color, and there's a little bit of brightness and contrast you can play with here. That's essentially, keeping your Polypaint in here, applying new materials in the material graph. Now this, I think, requires Pro. KeyShot 9.3 Pro. Of course, I use material graph all the time, so that's kind of something I want to keep. Let's see here. Shouldn't you always sculpt on a ZBrush model because of the clean topology? Generally, it's a little more predictable. You don't have to do anything, though. How to split a high number of parts model like a helmet. We can go over that maybe. How to make copies of one object and modify the original object, and all the copies of it will get the same modifications. Well, if I understand correctly, in the new ZBrush 2021, let's go ahead and pause that there. If you scroll down, there is somewhere here. NanoMesh Instances. You can use this. I'll start at like video 51. Actually, video 52 is my preferred method, and I can show you that one really quick. So let's go ahead and say delete all. And we've got our body mail, and we're going to say unify. And I want to put, let's get rid of those eyeballs. Okay, and also let's say delete lower. So what we want to do is like put a shoulder pad on him. So we want to go through here, or whatever, knee pad, elbow pad. What's something else we could do? That would be like, I want to put this instance all over the place. I mean, heck, we can do it with anything. So what I can do is, let's do this. Let's go here to append. It's going to append just a regular old poly mesh here. I'm going to go to my comma key here, and we're going to brush, and we're going to say IMM and Dragon Bones, and we're going to select this one. We're going to hit W. I'm just going to choose something. So this is our object here. So what we want to do is I'm going to kind of rotate this around to the direction I want, I suppose. I'm going to hold down Shift to snap it here, and I'm going to say, with this one selected, there's a new macro. And again, if you want to know more about this and like what a NanoMesh plane is and how you use instances with NanoMesh and whatnot, you watch those videos. Did I send those out? Yeah, start at video 51. That'll go through a little bit more. Like there's actually start here 49. There's a NanoMesh refresher, and then it'll go through. But anyway, we have this thing here, and there's a macro, so you can say create instances subtool. So click that button, and it'll say, hey, you can drag this thing around now, and it's an instance, so I can't sculpt on it. But if we go down here to NanoMesh, and NanoMesh is on, we can say show placement, and you can see there's just a big plane sitting there. So the cool thing about this is, and our original is hidden. So now we have this big instance sitting here, and we can move this wherever we want. So we'll go ahead and we'll put this here. And again, these are instances. You can't really sculpt on them. If I try to go through here with my standard brush and start sculpting, it's going to be like, what are you trying to do? And I see these little points out here. Again, it's only going to see your placement as viable geometry. The rest of this geometry is just an instance here. So we can go through here, and we can control drag this off. Like so. Make these big or small or whatever you want to do. Rotate them around, scale, move, rotate. You can even rotate or scale non-uniformly if you want, I think. Or do you have to go this direction? Maybe only 2 axes. Yeah, this axis isn't going to do anything. So we've got all these different horns on here, and it's like, okay, well now how do I sculpt on one and have it affect the rest of them? Well, that's when you can go through here and you can say edit mesh. So now we have actual geometry. We turn on polyframe. See, okay, I got real geo. So I can go through here and I can say polygroup, polyloop here, here, and here, and then inset, polygroup all or region. Pull these in, and then QMesh, polygroup all, hold down Shift, pull this in. And you can see as I'm doing this, they're all updating. In fact, I can go through here and say, you know what, let's just dynamesh this and go through here and start sculpting or smoothing this stuff out, and it's going to be updating on the fly, or I can completely switch this out. So I'm like, why do I have horns all over this thing? Let's go in here to BI brush insert industrial parts. I mean, we can use IMM brushes too. So you can go through here, and as we insert these, that'll update as well. Or like I did before, I can just completely swap these out with Phillips head here. Now, you may have to go through and you can eyeball it and reposition this back to where it would fit nicely within that plane, but you can also use your NanoMesh features. I don't know why necessarily you would do something this drastic, but it should be doable. But yeah, and you can also use Symmetry and all that good stuff, so watch those videos. That'll get you caught up in like instant sculpting. Now, one thing I do like to use this for is if we, let's go out of edit mesh here. You're doing something mechanical, and we got a little robot guy here, and there's also a BI brush insert. Oops, BI brush inserts H There's a single poly in here, so you can go through here, you can hold down Control, and you can snap these little planes all over the place. And then just like we did, Control-Shift-A, Control-Shift-Drag, split hidden. So now we have all these polyplanes. Let's hit Control-W, BI, Brush, Insert, Industrial Parts, Brush, Create, NanoMesh Brush. So now we can hover over a face with that brush, and we can say, oops, I deselected there, sorry. A little hotkey active, Insert NanoMesh, Polygroup All. So now we can go through here. I can be like, I didn't want that NanoMesh. I wanted a Phillips head all over here. Great, perfect. And now I can go through here and I can say turn off show placement. And now I can go through here and I can even change some rotation. So if I say like, oh, the Z rotation, I want a little variant so they're not all facing the same way. And I also want to inset these a little bit. So we'll do a little Z offset, kind of embed it a little bit in my mesh. Perfect. And then the art director goes, oh, those are all a little bit too big. Okay, so now these are all insert mesh brushes, I have to go through here and replace all of these. Or I can go through here and be like, okay, a little smaller, great. And then he's like, actually, you know what, I want a flathead screw. Okay, so instead of going through and replacing all these, you can just hit W and then go through here and just replace this. Now you may have to go through here and do a unify here. So now we've replaced those all with flathead screws, and in fact, you know how art directors are. They're like, I like that flathead screw, but now I want to do something over here. Again, we'll inset here, and I want a little ridge along here. Sure, we can do that. So now all of these have been updated with a little ridge, and then you can go through here again and change your X, Y, and Z offsets. And you can also do this individually because they're just planes that are driving these instances. Go over here, turn on show placement, hold down Control Alt, and then W, and then as long as you move this plane around, you can do this. Now, these are all set to proportional. If you use the macro, it would set it to fit, which is better because what you can do when you have it on fit, you can make these fit to scale, and then also you can use scale here to be like, I want this one to be a little bigger. Let's turn on LSIM. This one I want to be bigger, and you don't have to do show placement. You can literally just be like, okay, this one I want to be bigger, and then this one, go to Unmatched Mesh Center, and this one I want to be smaller. And also moved up, or Control drag up some more copies of that. So very flexible. After deleting subdivision, can we reconstruct it again? For instance, we're working ZModeler, sub-D. It's the best way to use ZModeler with multiple subdivisions. It's going to be very limited. That's why I like to use dynamic subdivisions. If you use multiple subdivisions, basically, and this is kind of a ZBrush 2021 new feature. Go in here to cylinder, edit, make polymesh 3D, and then we go through here, and it's like, okay, I want to, let's group by normals, and then increase PG, and then do like increase level of 2, smooth subdiv of 3. We'll put in a couple of control loops we can get rid of, like if we do increase level 1 here. A little bit of scalloping in here, so we'll say insert single edge loop, or we can do this. We can say give me this polygroup, Control Shift Drag, let's hit Control W, make these all one polygroup, and then we can go through here to make that more obvious. We can say inset polygroup all, we can inset both of these, so now we get a little control loop in here so it'll smooth a little bit better. There we go, nice smooth model. And then if I ever want to make changes, no big deal. In fact, while it's smooth, I can go through here and say polygroup polyloop, here and here. And in fact, I can start Alt painting in here and let go, and then we'll go ahead and paint this for me. Or if I was like, I messed that up, Alt and then Shift, paint back over this. You can also do Alt, start painting, and then in 2021 you can unpaint this. But basically, you can start Alt painting on this, tap Shift, inherit that, and then just start painting with that polygroup. So now we can go through here and we can say, what can we say? QMesh polygroup all, and now we're Z modeling. However, if we're like, okay, this is the perfect model, I love it, and I'm going to say dynamic subdivisions apply. Great. Oh wait, you know what? Actually, I want to take these poly loops and go through here and be like, oh crap, now I got a bunch of geometry. Well, I can still go down here and do like polygroup polyloop. It'll let me do that in ZBrush 2021 as long as it's not going to affect the vert order that has to be maintained to maintain your polygroups or to maintain your geometry and your subdivisions. You can do that. You can, if you wanted to, you could go in here to like freeze subdivision levels, and then it's like, okay, I can say QMesh polygroup all, pull this out, and then unfreeze my subdivision levels, and it might work okay. That can be pretty iffy. So if you want to use ZModeler on the lowest subdivision level, or even on the highest subdivision level if you want to, and it's like, okay, actually on subdivision level 2, I want to go through here and like maybe paint these ones, it'll let you. But if you want to go through here and change the vert count or order, QMesh polygroup all and pull this out, it won't let you. It'll be like, you have subdivision levels. So here's where you can go, well, you can delete lower, delete higher, pull this out, add supporting edge loops so you can reconstruct back. That's kind of a nightmare. You can use, you can go up here, you can freeze subdivision levels, you can take these two here, and then unfreeze subdivision levels, but it's like, I want to decrease that. So usually when I'm working, I just use dynamic because it's so much more flexible. As soon as you add subdivision levels, all of a sudden you're going to be hamstrung by lack of functionality. But you can reconstruct it if you want. But that's the thing too, is like, okay, so we're going to divide this up. Okay, looks great. Okay, I'm going to delete lower so I can actually go through here and be like, okay, I'm going to take this here and we're going to QMesh this out. Okay, great. I'm going to reconstruct. It's not going to let you because it's using an algorithm to go, I'm going to reconstruct all of these back to their original face, but we've added more faces over here. So if you wanted to do that, you could try going through here and being like, okay, we may be able to do something like insert single edge loop. And maybe reconstruct from that. I mean, there's ways, but I mean, we just pull out an arbitrary number of these polys. So yeah, that's going to be a tough one. There might be ways to do it, but I would rethink your methodology rather than trying to shoehorn a technique onto it. Like order of operations. Oh yeah, again, sorry if I missed something in here. 3D character workflow, yeah, that's all over my YouTube channel. Like we've done a lot of that stuff. If you like anything catches your interests, geez, okay, how many videos are we in here? My playlist here, there's like concept sketching, concept mech helmet. These are really old. There's character stuff in ZBrush. This one here. There's also when we have our previous live stream full episodes and stuff, like we do a ton of character work here. So here's like me going through some characters. Again, it's kind of old, but also over here on my works, this stuff hasn't been migrated over because it's so old and I wasn't doing it at the time. But if you go to my Pavlovich workshop and go all the way back to the beginning, episode 1, we go through and we do like anatomy and sculpting and put on a tech suit and start doing some armor and stuff like that. So it's there. But to answer the question, what's the best way to use ZModeler as multiple subdivisions? Don't. Like order of operations, do what you need to do without subdivisions, and then only do subdivisions and control loops when you actually have to. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a pain. If you can. If you can't, sure, there's like 9 hoops you can jump through, but gross. Geometry HD is used for really high resolution billion polygon sculpting. Center of filing, it's got my name in the file name. All right. Is there a way to make a subtool you're working on transparent? There are times when it'd be excessively useful. I don't think so. Yes. I don't have enhanced macros. That's something I have to download externally. I use 2020. That's a 2021. So of course, if you're a subscription user, 2021 is a free upgrade. And if you're you bought the perpetual license, it's a free upgrade. So why stay on 2020? Seems like a scale master and click center the world and resize the 2 for XYZ. After a while, its position is off and its scale is shifted slightly. If the position's ever off, you can go here to position and just zero out that X. So if it's like, why is my X symmetry off a little bit? Just go in here and hit 0 maybe. I'm not sure why your model would be. Again, I've been using ZBrush 15 years and I don't remember my model bouncing around like the scale massively unless there's like a gremlin or something. Hey, Saeed. This image is 2021, the Valerie is 2020. That's another thing too. If you're having like, there's some preferences in here, and under tablet, there's some new options if you guys missed that. On the 2021.1 upgrade, so you have tablet driver API. So if you're having like slowdowns and lag while you're using ZBrush, maybe try one of these other options. Is there a way to smooth your topology without moving it from place, like Maya's relax? There's a relax in here. Maybe. How did you make the electric pole look like it broke, as if you did it with a ZBrush feature rather than by hand? Yeah, that was just me going through here. So Shift D to, well, actually we don't have dynamic subdivisions. So here's dynamic turned on. So essentially, scale this in and scale this out. So we got our broken pole here. Whoa, do I have transpose cloth? Brush transpose regular? Brush transpose cloth. That's expected. Brush transpose regular transpose. That's not expected. Oh, I have X symmetry turned on. I was like, whoa, what is going on? Okay, so this is, it's the split mesh points. So through here, we can say group, group by normals, isolate this, delete hidden. And then through here, just do an extrude edge. And then I'm going to actually turn off attraction, so no attraction here. And I just go through here and just kind of pull out these things. And with 2021, oh, and if you missed this too, like I mean, obviously I did the 8 hours of videos that you can watch, but also, I don't know if it'd be faster or not, but there's also a, this Livestream full episodes playlist here, ZBrush 2021 new features. So we go through a bunch of the 2021 new features. One of those is edge extrusion. So now you can extrude edges, you can snap to surfaces, you can automatically weld stuff, but I basically just went through here and just splintered it like this, maybe turned on a little dynamic with thickness turned on. So there's dynamic thickness now. We'll go ahead and say this offset here. So that's all I did. Nothing spectacular. Just kind of go through here and did that for both sides. Explain the function, how it is working brush alpha and texture polypaint mode. Yeah, that's basic. So again, you're brand new to ZBrush, you don't know how Polypaint and Alphas work, right here. This is your guide. Look at these and you can learn all the brand new to ZBrush functionality like alphas and polypainting. When should you DynaMesh versus Sculptress when starting a character? Personal preference. Uh-oh. Something went wrong. I have to reload the page. Oh no, I just lost everybody's chat. Sorry about that. So basically, personal preference, DynaMesh, and a Sculptris Pro is where we left off. I'm going to go ahead and clear ZBrush out here. Turn this back on. And what we're going to be doing, oh yeah, we were making bird feet. So, cool. Sorry about that. I just lost the entire chat. It said something went wrong. Reload this page, and I reloaded it, and it destroyed the entire chat. Thanks. Restream. So let's go through here, and a couple different ways you can make feet. You can go through with the ZSpheres, obviously, and you can also go through here with like some cylinders and kind of bend them around. So we can start there. So here's a foot. Make Polymesh 3D, like so, and then we can say Control drag this off here, and we put a little toe right down the middle. And if I want to bend this, I can go through here. I'm going to say like bend curve, and I can put it down the axis that I want and the resolution I want. Go through here and be like, yeah, give me a little hook here. Cool. And then we can say control drag off this here, and you know what? We can even do it. We do like a mirror and weld. Turn on X symmetry, and we can dynamesh this to kind of put those together. I guess that'll work. Let's go ahead and dynamesh these. Go through here and inflate, and this can be the start of our beautiful foot. Now on the back here is probably another one. So this is where like you can go into Sculptors Pro, BSH for a snake hook brush, and kind of just pull out something worthwhile for this back talon here, and we're good to go. We have a chicken foot. So now we can go through here. To make this ZBrush Z-Remesh a little bit easier, we're going to go into Trim Curve. I'm just going to pop this top off here. Delete Hidden. And if we want to, we can actually control this. Let's hit Control W, Control Shift, Slice Curve. I can tell Z-Remesher, give me like little joint positions in between here. And again, we'll do a mirror and weld, and maybe along the back of the thumb here. It just might make it a little bit easier. In fact, if you want to get more concrete, you can actually go through here and you can slice. I'm trying to think. Oops. And we'll do another. There we go. So we've kind of controlled. Actually, that's like really gross. Let's do. Well, these are all really gross. Let's isolate this one, and we'll cut through here, and then we'll isolate this one, and we'll cut through here, and then we'll do another mirror and weld. There we go. So I'm basically telling Z-Remesh where I want my loops to go, and then we can go in here. Let's actually make this brighter so you can see it. Z-Remesher half, depth size down to 0 is probably fine. Keep groups, smooth groups down to 0 because it's already smooth. And we can just Z-Remesh this, get ourselves some new topology. What we can also do, and if it's having a little bit of issues here, one of the ways you can kind of fix this, you go there and smooth it, and then we can go there and start alt painting and tap shift to kind of inherit those, clean that up a little bit, help it out just a tad. And now Z-Remesh half. There we go. Looks like there is some, that's fine. Okay, good enough foot here, and in fact if you want to do a different algorithm, hold down Alt in Z-Remesh. I'll give you a little different algorithm. Actually, it works a little bit better. Okay, so we're good to go. Now if I want to UV this, I can use these. So if I want to go through here and do like a, what do we want to do? We want to do a Z plugin, UV master, symmetry, polygroups on, and you can unwrap with polygroups. So when we go in here to flatten, it'll be like this. However, I don't know if that's entirely useful because I want these polygroups to go down. So what I want to do is actually take these here, make them all one polygroup. So now I can unwrap these and then flatten. So I want to put these all down the same angle, or so they're pointing in the same direction. So we'll go through here and we'll just kind of move these around. Control Shift drag, Control Shift A, Control tap to mask these here. We can go ahead and turn off X symmetry as well. So, and the foot traveling in that direction. I guess these directions should be fine. I don't think. I'm trying to think through the problem here. I think this will be fine. So we'll go ahead and say unflatten. So now these, and if you want to play it safe, work on a clone. Or if you have subdivision history, work on a clone. So now we can, and actually, you know what I do like? I like to go through here and say close this hole here. Oops. Alt. There we go. And that might not have UVs. I don't really care that much. Or if the UVs are all in there, it's fine. So now what we're going to do is, although it didn't kill my UVs, right? Yeah, we're fine. So if we want to go through here and we want to do a, let's hit D for dynamic, a little bit of a smoother look. We're going to go also, let's go in here to B, comma key, brush. Is there a scales brush in here? Fish scales, lizard scales. Ah, these aren't really tiling though, are they? These are. we'll take these fish scales. So we have this brush alpha here. I'm going to say alpha export to my desktop. We'll call this fish scales. So if I want, go in here to surface, noise, alpha, grab those fish scales I just exported here. Let's say okay. I'm going to change this back over to SmackCap Gray. Maybe go into my dynamic. Oops. Sorry. Go in here, my dynamic, smooth this out a little bit. Again, surface noise, edit. We don't want to mix basic noise. We're going to take our alpha scale. If I scale that down, crank that strength up a little bit, we're going to say use my UVs. So now, and I can always move my UVs around as needed. But if I use my UVs, let's see if we can change that angle for this one. Z angle, X angle. No, it's not going to affect my alpha, is it? So I can go through here. I guess I can rotate that alpha. That's fine. So you can rotate your UVs or you can rotate your alpha. But essentially what I'm doing is playing around so I can get very precise scales going in the direction that I want. I can hit OK. And now I have this, but I want to go ahead and apply this to my mesh. So this goes back to, how do you apply this to your mesh and have control? So one of the things we need to do first is go in here to Geometry Dynamic, because right now this doesn't exist. So we need to go here and apply that, and in fact, probably give myself almost a couple million polygons here. So maybe go in here, make a new, let's go down here to Morph Target, Store Morph Target, Layers, add a new layer, Noise, Mask by Noise, and then we can go through here, go into Masking, and say turn off View Mask, and then you can like inflate through here. Oops. Deflate in this case, and now we can put on all these scales here, and it's like, oh great, but since we're doing it on a layer, we have the ability to go through here and just fine tune exactly how much, or if you want to invert it, or if you want to over crank it. You also have your morph target, so if you want to switch your morph target out and then do BMO and go through here, and you can I turn this layer back on. Yeah, I guess before we do that, let's go over here. We like this layer, bake all. Morph target, switch. BMO, you can go through here and like sculpt back in exactly where you want these to go if you want to like compound scales or something like that. Or you can just keep all of them. You can use your morph target to morph things out if you want, if that's better. We can go ahead and say delete morph target. So on top of here, we can add more scales to this through a layer, and you can also use we might even be able to use, let me see, let's go in here to our brushes, drizzle creature, scale, and let's see if we go down here, let's go to depth. Don't want this to be on there, and it's kind of pulling that geometry. I wonder if that's because we can use a layer brush, and I can go through here and I can add. I'm gonna have to think about this one. There should be a way where you can, I guess you could use your morph brush and kind of morph back through an alpha. Kind of an interesting one. I'll play around with this a little bit. And again, these are boy, these are intense. And that fall doesn't seem to be. Let's do this. Let's do a let's go out of edit mode. Switch. Let's go in here to our plane. Edit, make polymesh 3D, geometry, reconstruct back down to this, and then maybe divide this, oops, turn out smooth, divide this a couple more times, we'll pull out let's go back up here to Chisel Creature, Brush, from Mesh. So now we have this new one here. I didn't mess around with these settings. Well, I'll play with that. I think there is a way where you can kind of do that without messing around too much with the underlying, or you can override a little bit, but it might be a little bit much. It might also be an order of operations things, but Page Logic could memorize the folder you saved the project to avoid the time search when you export other files. I think that's a preference. Where's that at? Somewhere in here is a file, something or other, performance edit. Now in the edit, it would be miscellaneous. Oh yeah, use Z folders. I guess that's the opposite. That'll remember import, export, save. It'll go to the appropriate ZBrush folder for default for the example. So Z folder, ZBrush, Z tools will go to the Z tool folder, Z projects go to Z projects, alphas will go to alphas. But probably not what you're looking for. How can you make a liquid falling with ZBrush? It's more of a, I don't know. I'd have to play with that one. I'm not sure. Hey, John Yu. Yeah, I did totally lose the chat window. If you need to set X back to 0, you need to merge all subtools together so they follow. You can, I wonder if there's like a little Z repeat that you could do. It'll go ahead and do all of that, same number to all of them. It might be safer. I mean, not safer, but you could also just, if you have, let me see here, tool. Yeah, a bunch of different subtools in here. If you need to move something over, especially if it has, so position here, so like some of these positions got off a little bit, zero it out, and you can just kind of hit the, close these off. So you can hit this little, you just hit your down arrow. So as you go through here, you can just like, oop, this one's off. Just hit your down arrow. Oop, this one's off. Down arrow. Oop, this one's off. But again, those are off because they were moved. So in this case, it's not that they're off; it's that they were literally moved for a reason. But if it's off just a little bit, and you didn't move it for a reason, then maybe that would work. If I want to cape and I want to emboss line across it, how do I do that without having to draw the height manually? I mean, you can try surface noise. I guess I'm misunderstanding the word manually. I mean, if you want to line across something, it might be a little bit of a manual process. Oh, to go to your point, pre-drag, if you wanted to, like, let me see, comma key project here, and we want to do something like append plane here, rotate it, and you know what, let's take this head and shrink it down just a bit. Okay, so we have this plane here, we have new dynamic thickness over here under geometry, dynamic, we can turn this on, we can keep our smooth on, we can turn thickness up a little bit, we can say, go over here to our brand new dynamics folder, so exciting, gravity, calculated collision volume, run that collision, and then we got cloth here. Of course, if it's too stretchy, you want to play around with your simulation iterations, your gravity speed, turn that down, simulation iterations up. You can also change your firmness here. I'll keep firmness of 2, so it'll give us, so this will allow us more time for that calculation to take place. Again, this is all stuff that I go over in that playlist here. But now we have this, and we also have really cool micro poly, so I can go through here manually and just swap all these out. So if I want chainmail here, let's turn smooth so div down to 1. So now you've got like a chainmail cloth, so I go in here to a BTC and go through and like it's going to run the cloth simulation as I move this around, or be brush cloth. God, it's actually been a minute since I've used this. Brush cloth. Where's hook? It's something weird that I don't think of. BC K hook. You can go through here and you can just kind of pull this around. And again, it's running the simulation, and the micro poly is also being drawn after the fact. So you can go through here and you can change your hitch step, or you can change it to. You can also use custom in here. It's all in those videos I sent out earlier. This one, play all. Here it is. And then over there on the right, you have the entire playlist there. So we have this here, we have cloth, but what I was going to say is, let's go ahead and go back here. There's other things you can do if you wanted to make, there's two things you can do. You can use nanomeshers also, you can make a micro poly. So here's a micro poly of a cube, 1 by 1, so there's just a bunch of cubes in here. So if I go through here and I say, fit and weld is off, fit on is probably fine, so we can say let's apply these dynamic here. So now all of these are actual cubes here, and now if we run this with gravity, and we'll go ahead and turn on self collision here. Yeah, sorry. And we can keep floor collision on as well. But we'll go ahead and turn on self collision. Simulation iterations will turn back down to 100. Gravity will turn back up to 10. And now you can use this. Let's turn off polyframe here. So it might run a little bit faster. So now, like if you wanted to simulate water droplets, you could use micropoly for that to like simulate it's kind of a rigid body simulation in a way. It's basically every plane gets an instance. Now, this is actually turning this into real geometry. If you want to avoid doing that and you want to use micropoly for this, this is where you can go, let's see, here, edit, BI brush, insert industrial parts, W, Phillips, let's say unify, go back to our plane here, we can go back into our geometry micropoly, and we can, instead of actually turning it into real geometry, you can keep the planes here. So we're going to go in here to our micropoly, hold down control, grab that Phillips head. So now we have a bunch of Phillips heads as our mesh. And in fact, you know, again, brush cloth hook, it's just basically a Phillips head towel. However, we can go through here and we can turn off, I mean, we're not going to apply it, so it doesn't really matter, but we can go up here to geometry. I mean, you can try weld if you want to, but go in here to geometry, modify topology, and there's an unweld all. So now these are all still planes here. Oh, you know what? Turn off thickness. We don't need thickness on there. We don't need to double up our Phillips head. So we're going to turn off and also smooth subdivisions. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's hit Control D to actually make this real subdivisions, because that's how many Phillips heads I want. And we'll delete lower. And then I'm going to go down here to unweld all. So they're still just planes, but they're planes being replaced by a micro mesh, or I'm sorry, a micro poly. That. So now when we run the simulation, it'll run a lot faster. But basically the planes are what's determining the position of those pieces. So in that case, it's like, oh, you know what? I didn't want Phillips head. I wanted scales. So now it looks like little pistachio shells just fell all over the place. Or you could run the simulation with pistachio shells if you want. But again, it's just those planes driving those micropolys that's driving this. So you're going to see the simulation, number one, ran a little bit faster. But as far as like if I wanted to simulate like, oh, a water droplet coming out and then it comes up and it kind of splits open and there's like 12 little, I guess I could just do that. Like if you dropped a little drop of milk here, let's see, make Polymesh 3D. We're going to go in here. So you know what, let's just do a quick NanoMesh, transform, activate symmetry in the Y, radial count of 12. Maybe turn on Sculptors Pro, BSH, and go through here and be like, actually, what might even work even better, BS, snake hook, snake sphere. This one I can just kind of like wiggle here. So like depending on the surface normal, you can go through here and it's like, oh, it made a little dollop. And then maybe I went through here and it did like an inflate, and then maybe it did a little smooth here, so it's like, oh, this little drop happened in here. And then you can also go through here. Let's turn this off and let's say transform and radial symmetry. I don't have any reference up of what this would actually look like. I'm just remembering back watching like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street as a kid, and they would be like, here's slow motion photography in the early 80s. Isn't it crazy? It would be something like this. Now, to simulate that with a cloth sim, hell if I know. Now, that's not to say, I mean, you can run a quote-unquote liquid simulation. So we have our plane here, and it's like, okay, we're going to run gravity on this, and the gravity is just going to pull it down. And, you know, we're getting a little stretchy here, so let's go ahead and we can, you know, we'll slow that gravity strength down just a bit. And then now that'll give us enough time to calculate as it's going down. So you can make it run as fast as you want, or like we were doing before, BTC, transpose cloth, you can just pull it down, and it's going to be like, whoa, I don't have enough time to calculate those relationships. Or you pull it down slowly, and I'll give it plenty of time to drape while you're doing that. So that's one way. However, you're going to see if I turn on Liquify, well, if I have gravity and I run it, it's just going to pull that whole thing down until it runs into a collision surface, and then it acts like gravity's being applied to this surface. However, if I go over here and I turn on Liquify, it's not going to do anything because it needs something to kind of kickstart it. So we're going to go through here and we'll just pull in some divots here, and then when we run our gravity Liquify, you're going to see it's going to behave not like gravity where it's just like, I'm going to fall until I hit something. This is more like it's falling through a liquid surface. So if you wanted to do something that's like, oh, I want this to, oh, and also maybe, oh, you know, it's more heavily weighted over here. So you know what, let's restart this. I'm going to give it a little something to think about on this side. You know what, let's also turn up that gravity strength back up to 10, so it's not falling so slowly. There we go. There we go. So now it's like it's falling through water. So you can see a little bit of a difference there. Now, as far as to like get a splash or a water effect, what you could do is you could fracture the geometry and you could run like a ball bearing through the surface, or have it as a collision volume and run the surface past the ball bearing is more accurate. And it could do something with that geometry that would look kind of liquidy, like a bullet hole going through a piece of metal. But trying to run a simulation on a hard surface like falling stone keeps acting like cloth. Firmness doesn't help. Many subjects keep the polys from acting like cloth. That's going to be tough. Even when I was doing this one, the car wreck, it's still a cloth simulation. It's not a rigid body. You're not. I mean, again, it's who knows what ZBrush has up its sleeve. But when we're going through here and we're simulating, did I have this mixed up? I did. Oh, at the beginning. Yeah, like this kind of stuff here, where the truck's going through, and I guess we can just do that. It's not that difficult. Load the tool here. Resources, truck. So if you get the bonus videos and bonus Z tools, you'll get this along with it, and you can follow along. Gumroad and ArtStation, not QBrush right now. So we're going to go through here, we're going to turn off the tanks, and we're going to turn off everything but the truck, essentially. Okay, so we have this truck here, and we're like, okay, I want to simulate this truck crashing into things. And it's all a bunch of different subtools. We're going to go in here to Z plugin, and we're going to say, transpose master, T-pose mesh. We're going to take all of these meshes in here, and there's a bunch of dynamic turned on. All the smoothness that you see is just fake. It's not real. So here's the actual geometry, or the lowest subdivision geometry, depending on what's there. And also the glass I probably should pop out because that's going to behave erratically, and plus I'm going to shatter it later. But if we go in here to append a cylinder here, we use this cylinder, as our collision volume. Of course, BTR is what we're looking for here. That's our regular transpose. So here we have something for it to collide with. So I can take this truck here, hit W, BTC for cloth, transpose, go in here. Let's turn this up so we can kind of see it a little bit more maybe. And then dynamics. So because it's looking at these relationships and going, I'm going to use this algorithm to simulate like cloth. It's not thinking, oh, I'm going to use this to simulate like metal. You're just going to get a cloth. Let's go ahead and turn off floor collision response. Now you can kind of fake it a little bit, like you were saying with like firmness up at 6. That'll make it so that self collision off. So firmness of 6 will be let's see, gravity off. Sorry, Liquify is doing some crazy stuff. Turn that off. So we have we're also running to a collision volume we calculated earlier. Rerun that collision volume. So now, boom, as we go through here, it's like, okay, it kind of seemed like metal, possibly for 2 reasons. Number one, there weren't enough spans in here. So when you're doing like, I want to take this tank and simulate it, if you have a ton of geometry there and you simulate something on it, it's probably going to start cloth simulating. If you don't have a lot of geometry there, like this back here in the truck bed, you're going to see it's a little bit more successful as it kind of bounces around. It kind of maintains its form a little bit better. Like, see how that truck bed is like, yeah, I'm still pretty much a truck bed. There's nothing for it to really simulate. We have firmness way up, and there's not a whole lot of points across here. So it's kind of behaving as you would expect. Now, this thing in here, it has more points. It's going to simulate, or, you know, this fabric seat we had in there, those are going to simulate a little bit more like cloth because there's more points in there, and the more points, it's looking at those relationships between those points, and it's going, okay, I'm going to maintain these relationships like a cloth sim. Now, that's hacky. I'm not saying like this is how you should do metal simulations. I'm just saying in ZBrush, given the current system as of this recording, that's awesome. That might be a way to control it, is just to have very, very few points, and it'll maintain its form much better than if I was to go through here and like cut a bunch of edges into this truck bed. It would start immediately crumpling as opposed to maintaining its form. So something to consider. Or in this case, we can like, you know, change its gravity, turn on gravity, set the direction in this direction, and then we can use our sim to go ahead and run for us. And then the wheels just keep on going. Look at that. Perfect simulation. Just get sheared off and the wheels just keep going. So maybe give that a shot. Is there a way to make this update you're working on transparent? Again, as far as I know, no clue. I have no idea. I don't think so. I don't know. That's like a Gabriel question. Okay, and if process, if you want to make a plane with a grid and apply a NanoMesh with stone as a model, then unweld all. Same thing, and if you want it, so okay, we want to, boom, there's our car wreck. Oops, move a little bit slower. Oh, we did a car wreck, cool. So I'm going to take this here, delete it out of our scene, and then we can just take this back. So we're going to say Z plugin, transpose mesh to CTA. So then all these things with our dynamic settings and our niceties in here is going to be updated to our car wreck scene, and then we can modify from here. But if you wanted to like a crumbling stone wall, you can use NanoMesh and simulate. I would still try first to do micropoly, just because it's going to run a little bit faster. It won't be perfect, but again, if you wanted to do got a plane here, make Polymesh 3D, go down here and say what you want to say reconstruct. So here's our stone wall, delete higher. Let's make some stones real quick. So we're going to go in here and we're going to say cube, edit, make Polymesh 3D. Now I don't care about this necessarily being like, oh, it's, oops, BTR. It needs to fit perfectly within whatever. It's like it can do whatever. So we're going to make a square stone. If I want to, I can unify, but we're going to have this thing falling down, right? So we're going to go through here. Let's go ahead and just dynamesh this. We'll say trim dynamic. Hold on just a second. girls got their heartworm because it's September 1st. So we're going to go through here and we'll make a little bit of stone here. There's also stones you can get out of your brush palette here. We're going to make some blocky stones. And then we can go through here, and in fact, let's do this. Let's go into, because if we're using micropoly and we're making a bunch of instances of this, we want to be as low as possible. So let's plugin, oops, decimation master, preprocess current, K polys down to 1K. Trying to get this pretty low. Okay, great. So now here we can call this stone. However, if we also want to duplicate this off a bunch of times and go through here and like make variants through here, so it's like I want one stone that kind of looks like this. Now the important thing here if you're using micropoly is you cannot change the vert order. So you can go through here, oh, and actually hopefully it didn't give us nasty geometry, because if I had to fix this mesh, micropoly might not work that great. You know, so keep your same vert order, but go through here and make any adjustments you want. So now with these adjustments, it'll go through and it'll cycle through all these different rock types. So now when we go in here back to our polyplane and we say geometry, dynamic, smooth off, micropoly on, control tap, stone. Now all of those different stones are kind of being populated on here. Now you can say don't weld, don't fit, scale this up a little bit so it kind of, whoa, it doesn't update on the fly. So it's a little bit touchy. Just, okay, you can tap it and then maybe grab this upper slider a little bit. There we go. Okay, whew. Here's our stone wall. Now we'll switch back over here to starter material. So remember stone wall here and we want to start crumbling. It's still a micropoly. So if you turn micropoly off, it's still just a plane. So you can go in here to unweld all. And then now when you go through here and you say collision volume off, we'll just set the floor collision on, gravity's fine. Self collision, if you turn this on, those planes are really gonna see each other and they're gonna go nuts, and our gravity direction is in the wrong direction. So we'll turn this gravity down just a bit. There we go. So now again, it's just those planes simulating, but you know, if you overcrank it enough, you know, go in here to your scale and maybe just make it so it's just kind of over, you know, they'll behave a little bit more. Now again, it's just a plane, but it's taking those pieces of geometry and moving them around. So now here's the thing, if you go through here and you're like, okay, I've got my stones, and I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say, same thing with nanopoly, it's just NanoMesh, it's going to have these as instances, and then you can unweld all and run the simulation. Same thing with micropoly, you might have more leeway with NanoMeshes, there's some more options in here where you can do like variations and stuff. But same idea, where you can unweld all and have the instances follow that plane around. However, I think micropoly runs faster. But if you're thinking, well, okay, let me just apply those as real geometry here, and now I'm going to run the simulation. It might run okay-ish because we have so little geometry, so it's going to maintain its forms a little bit better. So we run the simulation here with a lot of self-collision here. Yeah. And it's also pulling a lot of points around, so oof. Yeah, not so much. Self-collision, firmness, strength, simulation iterations. Crank that up, I suppose. But that's a little bit of a taller order. And kind of does it, but boy is your mesh getting sheared a little bit, you know. But at least it's taking into account all those polygons, so as it crashes, I mean, it still doesn't have great. It'll kind of do something. I just do these streams once a month. First Tuesday of every month, I'm on Pixelogic's channel, and then copy the video over my YouTube channel, and then the first Thursday of every month. This Thursday coming up, I'm only going to be able to be on here for like an hour because I have to jumpstart my wife's car and get a new battery for it. You focus on scopes, topology, or portfolios in general. I try not to focus on topology. Topology is pretty straightforward. Scopes are cool. Portfolios, also cool. How do you make a UV sphere in a rectangle or a circle? I'm not sure I follow. Oh, detail around the edge of the cape without being sculpted in manually, such as the curve functions, frame mesh border. Oh, I thought they were talking about, so let's make a cape real quick. I thought they literally meant like a, well, here's a cape. Perfect. Brush cloth hook. So actually, BGC. So here's this, oops, rerun that collision volume here. So here, oh, firmness of 2. And we'll go ahead and say mask here. So we have a cape, brush cloth hook. And what a beautiful cape it is. So if it's literally just going, oh, I want to bore, I thought they were talking about like I want to put like a stripe across this cape. You can still do it. It's just going to require a manual process. If it is literally just something as simple as like going over here to where are we looking here? We don't want a mask. We want to stroke this curve functions to my open border. Or if you did have polygroups, we do Shift D, and it's like, you know what? Let's do Control Shift, select lasso, and then we do an auto groups here. So now every single one of these, if we run a frame mesh border with polygroups now instead of open border, we get stripes across here, and then we can go through here and do like brush curve strap snap or something, and you can just put straps across here, hit 5 to set that. So now we can do a Control Shift A, split hidden, so now you have straps going across that. If that's all you're talking about, then yeah, you can use polygroups or whatever. If you're talking about, let's go ahead and say, delete that. If you're talking about like, I want to put something across here, that might be an order of operations thing. You may want to UV it first so you can flatten it out and then put something along a surface, or put it in the texture. If it's just a stripe, unless it's for 3D print, I mean, hell, even if it is for 3D print, maybe putting a stripe in a texture, applying it as a displacement map might be easier. But you can always go through here, and as long as you have, see, plugin, UV master, symmetry polygroups, not symmetry, not polygroups. We'll just unwrap this and hit flatten. So like, there's our cape UV'd back there. We can always go through here now that we have UVs, and we can go to our UV map. We can morph our UV. And then let's take a bump down to 0. So now while we're in morph UV mode, you can do whatever you want. So you can go through here with your clay build-up brush and be like, I want to put a stripe across here. Let's turn on lazy mouse. Let's go in here. I guess we have stroke already open, don't we? Nope, I guess not. Stroke, lazy mouse. Let's hold down Shift, I guess. Boy, that really doesn't want to work. Okay, fine. We'll go in here to lazy mouse. Oh, it's because I had it off. There we go. So you can put a stripe across here, or we can do a backtrack line, snap to track, and just put a stripe across here, or paint it in if you want, or go in here to your texture import. Add this, tile this a couple times, paint, spotlight paint. Of course, you need more resolution to capture that, but you can go out of morph UV and go ahead and save this. So if you wanted more resolution, this is where you'd go. Dynamic, let's turn this material on too. Geometry, divide, 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 divide. There we go. We got some resolution now. We'll remorph that out. Paint. And there we go. So now we were able to paint, we're able to sculpt if we want to. Go back in here to our clay buildup and sculpt a line across here, morph it back, and then you'll have a line across your cape. Or standard brush alpha, RGB, turn on lazy radius, morph UV. There you go. Extractor brush drew a line across UVs like the shirt was splat, so it's easier. Yeah, exact same thing as this. In fact, if you're new, just like for ZBrush 2021, you may blow your mind. I also have a ZBrush 2020 What's New. So if you completely missed that train, here's 41 videos on all the new. If you don't know what an extractor brush is, check this series out. That'll get you caught up. Oh, that's probably my fault. Let me see. What am I looking for here? Usually it's set up, but when in doubt, I'm going to go ahead and head out. But here, right before I head out, I'll go ahead and do a drafts. Why is this running so slow? Come on. Come on. Streaming. We'll try this. Yes, but the whole point of it was like, how do you do this not manually? Well, of course you can flatten and do a bunch of manual work. Not manually part is the part I was oh boy, I'm way behind. Can you recommend a spec for working with 100 million plus polygons? No. I have my computer runs like butter, but it's all I'm using. AMD Ryzen Thunderbird 3970X 32 core processor. I think on this one I have 64 gig of 3600 speed RAM and NVMe M.2 drives. If you want to know more about that, you can check out my YouTube channel here. Let's go ahead and close that out. If you go in here and do workstation, so CPU, hard drive speed, RAM is pretty important for ZBrush in particular. Here's the updated video, so if you want to know more about like what the hell is an M.2 drive, this will have what the hell is a 3970X. This will have a bunch of information on that. So again, I don't know what's going to work in your situation or what you're actually running, but for what it's worth. Yes, and if I miss your comments, I apologize. I don't really care that much, but I'm sorry. When confused where a snake hook places geo, I had Sphere with Sculptors Pro. I wanted to pull a tail out the XY camera plane when I was done. I was also pointing out in the Z. Well, so yeah, there's it's under the Modify brush. So here's move and snake hooks, new snake hook functionality. Might help you these top 2 videos. And here's the problem, whenever I type in a message, it shoots it all the way down to the bottom, so then I gotta go all the way back up through a bunch of comments from 3 different sources. So that's why it gets a little bit hectic. And also, I'm not doing anything. So I'm not over here sculpting a creature for 4 hours and then being like, oh, let me answer some slow questions coming in. I'm literally answering like all these questions for 2 straight hours. It's a little more difficult. But so as far as that works, here's a sphere, and they're all over the place. It's not like, hey, we're going to be talking about creatures today. I only answer creature questions. It's like, how do you make geometry transparent? And also, how do you frame a mesh? And also, how do you make a rock wall fall down? And also, you know, it's scattered. So bear with me. Make Polymesh 3D. BSH, snake hook. Sculptors Pro on. So it'll go ahead and do this geometry. It'll update the geometry as we go. So then we can go down here to our modifiers brush, and we can say, is it under modifier Sculptors Pro? Somewhere in here. What am I thinking of? So if we go through here, we do BSH. There's a snake sphere, and you're going to see this one's going to behave a little bit differently. And I thought it was here. Oh, you know what? Is it under? It's not under stroke. It's under brush. Ugh. So here, yes, brush modifier is what I'm looking for. So here's brush modifiers at 100, and it's going to see it's just going to kind of follow straight out from that brush stroke. If I set it to 0, you're going to see it's going to, let me see, which one is it? Brush modifier at 100. Okay, yeah, so brush modifier at 100, if I just kind of wiggle it on here, it's going to follow straight out at the camera. If I set it to 0, if I wiggle it, it's not going to do much of anything, but when I pull, that's going to follow kind of the brush direction. So if we go through here and we set it to 50, it'll kind of be between camera and brush direction, something like that. But again, those snake hook brushes should give you, I don't use them that much, but that should give you a little bit more control over what direction that thing's going. Let's see. Less polys. Let's see. Does anyone get an issue with orbit navigation 2020? I'm trying to click drag on the canvas to orbit sometimes breaks and I have to click drag the margin instead. Let's see. So we're in here. You can also use right click navigation if anybody isn't aware of that. You can use your right click to get out of sticky situations. But click drag on the canvas to orbit. And I have to click drag over here. I mean, that if you're zoomed in, it's only going to sculpt. So then over here, you do have to use your safe action or the margins to do it. But that's as expected. Cool. Cool, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, the ZBrush radiation, even the free videos will get you up and running on YouTube. Cool, I think I updated the title. Is there a way to rotate in increments with this gizmo instead of rotating in big steps? I think so. I think if we do like, oops, we still have cloth turned on. That's okay. So if we hold down shift, it's going to snap to increments of 5. As far as like, can I set that to 1? Gizmo 3D increment settings. Oh, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I assumed it might be in here. It wouldn't be under transpose units, would it? Rotation steps 18? That might just be for transpose though. Defines the degrees that ZBrush will snap when pressing shift and moving the end of the transpose action line. Yeah, so you can hit Y and use transpose, and maybe this. So if you hold down shift, it gives you that much rotation, and you can hit Y. That's not translated to the gizmo. Isn't it better to use less cores and more gigahertz CPUs for those single-threaded operations? Sure. If you're only ever doing single-threaded operations, which I can't think of one example of where that's the case, yes. However, I'd be careful with that because not everything you're going to be doing is single-threaded. And even in ZBrush, you know, like, oh, I'm going to run a cloth sim. That's single-threaded, right? Wrong. Wrong. Scales wonderfully. So whatever single-threaded operations you think you're running, you're probably wrong. You know, and with the new ZBrush 2021, it seems to scale fantastically. So again, like if all I was doing was like 1080p gaming and doing ZBrush operations that only used a single core, maybe I would consider being like, well, let me just go for the fastest core. But of course, I do video editing, rendering, 9 million other things that require, why the hell would I want a fast single core if I'm going to take the hit on the other 99 things I do to get a slight 3% increase in speed for this one single core operation I do in this one program? Obviously, that's silly. So pick and choose your battles. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but that's usually the silly argument. Cool. Right on, everybody. It is 8:11. I'm 11 minutes over. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you Thursday for an hour on my channel, and we'll go from there. What made you go AMD over Intel? Intel doesn't have anything that competes with AMD when it comes to multi-core CPUs, and also PCIe 4.0, NVMe drives, all that good stuff. They're just not competitive right now. Cool. Thanks, everybody, and catch you next time.